All right. So just wanted to take a second and introduce myself. My name is Whitney Soenksen, and I'm the Deputy Chief Information Officer for the City of New Orleans. I've been with the city for over 8 years, and in the previous administration as a project manager for Mayor Landrieu, and did a variety of things on that team. And one of my biggest passions when I was on that team was working on the open data portal and opening data sets. So not that that was my first foray into data, but it was one of the things that made me really excited about data and to continue on a career in the IT world. So that's kind of my passion. A couple of things that I've been doing lately that make me excited is I'm an Eisenhower Fellow. If anybody is interested in the program, let me know. They do well with referrals. It's an international program that hosts folks who are passionate about a subject in almost every country. So I ended up going to China last year to look at how they're using big data to solve city problems. And if you know anything about China, you know their cities are just ginormous. So they're, you know, multiple millions of people, and their, you know, smallest city is, you know, the size of whatever, New York or something. So that's what I've been up to. I've got varied background. Then here's our agenda, right? So these are the themes I'm going to talk about. Data in general in the city of New Orleans, and I'll try to do that pretty quickly so that we can get to questions. Big data, just a simple definition and some examples. And then that leads into smart city initiatives, the way that we use big data in the city. And then I have to mention our cyber attack and what that taught us about data. And then what's going on now, right? How are we using data to react to the current COVID-19 emergency, and then other data initiatives? So we'll work on that. All right, this is my quick history. I'm not going to touch on all of these points, but this is my timeline of kind of the cool things I got done while I was at the city. And the things I just want to point out are that we use data for a variety of things, right? We open data so that people can use it to develop or to find answers to research questions or press questions. But what that often enables us to do at the city, if we open it, is to create tools that citizens can use. So as you read through, you'll see in 2014, 2015, and then through to 2016 and on, we've created a variety of tools at the city so that citizens can get additional information about their neighborhood, about things that are happening, and just in general, a touch point of facts at the city. And I get really excited about data and facts. And so that's what I love about data work in general. The other big thing is that we actually published a policy related to data, and it really mandates the way that we're supposed to handle data going forward and how departments are supposed to facilitate data sharing and open data. So that was a big plus for me. We've got a lot of press and accolades, so I don't have to sell you on anything, I don't feel like, but I do want to let you know that sometimes in the city of New Orleans, folks get very down to the weeds about what the city's up to and the things that they're doing, and should this data be open, should this video be on, blah, blah, blah. Kind of nationally, we're recognized as one of the best cities for open data, and we continue to run that, right? So just a couple of accolades. And then I do want to show you this real quick. This is how we set our standard and our priorities for our open data. There's a national movement toward an open data census, which essentially is what of these standard data sets do you have open? You kind of see in the middle how other cities fared, right? And on the right-hand side, there's information about the different data sets that we have open or not, right? So we have a long way to go. to actually realize the things that we want to realize on our open data census work. Then here's the nerdiest of all the nerdy slides, open data request trackers. This is data about data. You can see at the bottom where people have requested certain data sets, and then how far along we've got on making that public or not. And so we can use this to track folks' requests for different open data, whether it's internal or external. So let's get to the meat of this. What is big data and why do y'all care? Here's just the general definition. Big data is a way to capture, analyze, use data sets that are too big for Excel or traditional data sets or data processing applications. And when you talk about big data, what I always like to talk about is that metadata is oftentimes one of the most important things that you can have within that big data, right? Metadata is data about data. So that previous slide was kind of telling. And it helps you extract meaning from the different intakes, right? So if you're doing video data or sensor data, when you know what's contained within those sensors or within that video, that's going to help you use that data. And so that's really just big picture, just so we're both on the same page, all on the same page about what I'm referring to when I refer to big data. So we have a variety of big data at the City of New Orleans, right? You can think right off the top of your head, NOPD uses cameras. We've got, if I was mobile, I would show you outside of my door, a brand new real-time center camera on the corner. So we've got camera monitors throughout the city. We have a few trash cans that have sensors in them. And then you'll see here at the bottom, I talk about the new airport visitor lot. That's a good example of some sensors as well. So these challenges and the things I'm going to talk about not only are relevant for the City of New Orleans, but they're kind of relevant for cities across the board. When I was in China and talking to leaders in really big cities, right, like Beijing, Shanghai, Nanjing, and a lot of other big cities, they all talked about the same challenges, right? Which is getting to the point where you're capturing data, you're storing, you're able to analyze it, you can share it, you can visualize it, and that you can use it in a way that benefits either, you know, you as a city or residents of the city, move around, but whatever. The challenges are challenges because big data is relatively new. It's just recently that we had the bandwidth to have these types of data coming in and getting somewhere where it can actually be used. And so challenges are really ongoing and will always be ongoing. I'll say for us at the City of New Orleans, we have a storage challenge and we struggle a lot with the fact that we are under the state of Louisiana's rules for keeping public records, right? These things are public records. And we adjust folks' expectations and we adjust our time to store based on certain additional agreements that get made in between. I'm gonna give you just a heads up. Apparently my internet connection is unstable. So I'm just gonna say that I'm as close to the router as I can possibly be on a chair. So this has been happening. The second thing is using big data, right? So big data is by definition something that's hard to use. And what the most proactive and successful folks who use big data are able to use it to do predictive analytics, or they're able to use it to do planning, large scale planning for different cities or different initiatives. The usage really, I always think of it as, before you just start throwing sensors out into the wild, or throwing up a video camera, the question I always ask is, how is it going to be used? And that always really has to be baked in to any agreements you're entering into, or any type of public commitments you're making. And so that's the focus whenever I'm working on any big data, or as we'll see later, smart city projects. So some of the examples that cities tend to use related to big data are Internet of Things, right? So anything that can come in through a wireless connection can be tapped into through this, right? I'm assuming you all know the Internet of Things moniker. And so there's just a whole lot of examples there, from cell phone GIS data to, I'm blanking on another example, but you get what I'm saying. We've got sensors out there, video, I said already. Healthcare and cybersecurity have a lot of data in them as well. And before I jump to our smart city example, I'm just gonna throw this out there because it'll come in later, and I think it's key. Privacy is always a concern, and security of the data. So when we're talking about challenges, usage, anything that we're talking about, privacy and storage of the data are super duper duper important. And we'll see why, right? When we get to big data in the city context, it translates then into this whole idea of a smart city. There's conferences about smart cities. There's people making gajillions of dollars out there peddling smart city applications, or tools, or services, right? Consulting services, and I've seen them all. And they're probably in my LinkedIn inbox right now. But the smart city crowd is really cool. I would say at the heart of the folks who work in different cities throughout the country, who do this work at different companies, is this real commitment to data, and a commitment to using the technology tools that we have to harvest data, and to use that data to make your life better, my life better, everybody's life better. I'm going to show you this quick YouTube video. It's like 2 minutes. Keep in mind, something like this, I'm not sure if it's, and I'm not promoting this project at all, or this product at all. It's just a simple explainer about sensors, if you've never kind of understood how they work. But we have one of these at the new airport visitor lot, which is exciting. So let's go ahead, make it big.
Whitney, is the video pulled up? I think we might have to switch the screen share to the other window where the video is open.
Oh, sorry.
All good.
Yeah,
you just have to stop your screen share and switch to the browser with the video.
Okay. Thank you for jumping in.
Gotcha. No problem.
That makes sense. Okay. Yep. We'll go back. I'll just go back a little bit because there's some good stuff there. Sorry about that, everybody.
And looks like we may have some sound issues. So if we could also share the link in the chat box in the bottom so folks could watch this on their home computers too, that would be great.
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll pause it there. I think it's probably my internet connection. I'm not going to lie. All right. So we'll just go back to this. This is just fine. So I'll share that. It's also in this slideshow. Mary, I can get you the updated version. This is a little bit different. But if you want to see a cool smart city example or sensor big data example, if you go to the airport and you pick somebody up and you park in their temporary lot, I think it's called the visitor lot, you get actually 30 minutes free, which is exciting. And you can experience this new wave of smart parking. All right, so that's just kind of overview. Now, what I want to tell you about is that we were going along. We actually had a project with Entergy in the works for a smart city initiative. There was a lot of talk about how we were moving forward with that type of work. I was going to conferences, I was talking about smart city initiatives and big data, and how my focus is using big data and smart cities to improve people's lives, right? And balance people's need for privacy with the good that it could do. And so I talked a lot about that, and we're moving forward on that. And then on December 13th, the city experienced a cyber attack, and thankfully we didn't lose our data as a result of that. So that's part of this, great responsibility with data is security. I'm not going to talk a lot about security because there's a gajillion places you can get information about that. But for those of you who are really into cybersecurity, I can answer questions about that if they're not too specific. So we had this cyber event on December 13th. And before that, we were really focused on launching these smart city initiatives. And the questions that I always asked when we started on down these roads is, first of all, when you put your sensor up, when you put your video up, when you launch your smart city initiative, where are you storing the data? If you could hear the YouTube video, it talked about a little box, right, that sat on, looked like it was sitting on a pole. Oftentimes, these big data initiatives in cities have boxes where the data is stored locally, and then they send it out to a cloud, or somebody else's big data hub somewhere. And so that's always my first question. Where is it stored? Who's going to own it? Who can access it raw, and who can access it analyzed? So part of big data, as we mentioned, is analyzing it, right? And visualizing it and making it available to use to make decisions. And so it's really important that you set out ahead of time who can access it and what to do with it. And then the other part of the agreement is just making sure that the person that you're entering in, or the entity that you're entering in an agreement with, and you are set on what that initiative has set out to do. Oftentimes, companies and cities have very different priorities. Sometimes they align. And so as we evaluate all of these big data initiatives, these smart city initiatives, we're always making sure that we're in alignment with the city's purpose and what we've committed to do for residents. So we're going down this path, and then December 13th happens, and it was nuts. We essentially rebuilt our entire network. We rebuilt almost all of our, not almost all of our servers, and we re-imaged, I think, 4,000-ish computers at the city. So it was a lot of work, but we're better now, and we're more stable now, and definitely more secure now. The thing that the cyber attack taught me is that auditing and managing data is super duper duper important. I knew it deep down in my bones. I wasn't always able to make progress to make sure that these initiatives were top of mind. But these are the 4 things that I just really wish I could have done more work around before the cyber attack happened. So the first thing that the cyber attack taught us, that you have to have people to interface with other people. You have to make sure that you have documentation, right? So this thing on the right-hand side, I could explain in detail, but it's really nerdy. Essentially, we had at one point in time did a disaster plan, right? And planned for the city to be underwater. So we ranked our applications according to what would happen if we had experienced another hurricane flood event, right? And you can see that reflected in the tier column, right? So the second column over, if it's a 0 tier, a 1 tier, those were the first things we were gonna bring back, right? But you can see in the cyber recovery that llama was a number 4 originally, right? And it rose to the top. And that was because it was important for our safety and permits folks to have access to llama. So just depends, and you have to have plans for everything. And then post data or post cyber attack, we had a lot of conversations about data loss, future prevention of data loss, storage. And then our next step is to continue to reconnect our open data sets and build our community as we were before. So we're moving forward and making a lot of progress. What's going on now? Everything's crazy. So just to get a snapshot of what the City Hall looks like in New Orleans, there's maybe a handful of people there. They're considered essential employees. Some people just dip in to do, like, you know, some things that can be done on site faster than off site. But it's really a ghost town. But our mayor's still there. She comes every day. I come every day. And we are working to take data. Sometimes in the case of health data, right, the state is managing that. And what we're doing with them right now is developing a data agreement and signing a data agreement so they can share that all with us. And that will then have to have some place to put it, right? So first thing I asked today when they said, hey, we're signing the agreement is, okay, where are we putting this data, right? Because it has to have compliance with certain laws, right? HIPAA and things like that. So moving forward, there's just 2 little case studies I want to talk about. The first is publishing 311 data. So pre-cyber attack, we had 311 data as an open data set. And I've got the link right here. I'm not going to jump over to it, but essentially it's one of our most visited data sets. And if you don't know what 311 is the number you can call in a variety of cities, and you can report like a city issue to that number. So, hey, I have a broken street light. Hey, there's a leak on my street or whatever. And they'll catalog that, and then those calls are supposed to get prioritized for service. That's what good 311s do. We decided to reconnect our 311 data just as this, virus started hitting New Orleans. And we reconnected the 311 data. I actually had a developer we have on our team. He did that just without me asking, just went ahead and did it. And all of a sudden, he gets a call in the middle of the night, and one of the people that works for our chief administrative officer is freaking out because in that 311 data, they had added a section where people could call in to say that they were having COVID symptoms, right? So I'm June, I'm scared. I call 311 to get information about what to do if I have symptoms. They are logging that call. And they're logging that call with June's personal information, right? And we had that all out there. So in the middle of the night, our developer has to get up, you know, weed out these calls, filter them out, make sure, you know, they don't actually appear in our open data set because there's HIPAA, right, to consider there. And essentially, if you're not sure what a problem might be with that data, is that even if you're personally reporting a medical condition or a medical need, any of your personal information attached to that thing is essentially HIPAA data. And so we had to be really careful about that. And so took it down. But the reason that all happened is because we don't have a data manager anymore, an open data manager. That was me. And we haven't been able to backfill that because of all of these issues, the cyber attack and then this new thing. And then 2, we always had a process. We always had a process to review what columns, right, and what types are coming into each data set. Well, because this just was a pickup from previously, we just, you know, plugged it back in and said, okay, roll, and didn't do all of the due diligence. So I just want to let you all know that that's why it's really important to have somebody overseeing any type of data that could be sensitive within big data. And it's important to have a process. Lastly, the city's doing a lot of things with data. I think my friend and my colleague Ron is on this call, and he did a little work with me today on this actual project. And the case study here is that the city is receiving donations and supplies from all over. The federal government, the state government, cities ordering their own supplies. We're getting stuff from nonprofits, we're getting stuff from corporations. And all of that is going to the Smoothie King Center, and the Smoothie King Center is acting like a warehouse. And within that warehouse, there's things coming in, right? So they catalog that. And then when folks come to pick up supplies, so say you are a person who works for property management with the city of New Orleans, you could come there and you could get gloves or masks or other, you know, PPE equipment to help you in your day-to-day work. And what the city leadership is concerned about is how quickly we're burning through all that, right? So this burn rate. And initially, when I was asked to do this project, I said, okay, do you have the data? Oh, yeah, we have the data. So I go over to the Smoothie King Center. I say, hey, show me your operations. Tell me what you do. How do you do it? All this good stuff, right? So we walk around, and I notice that the intake and the giving back out, right, is all paper-based, right? So I'm like, okay, this is cool. Like, at least you're tracking it. How do you get it from paper, you know, to electronic? Okay, we do that manually. Okay, good to know. You know, I asked if it was possible for me to help you make that electronic, would that be something you'd be interested in? The answer was yes. And so throughout this whole process, we've been able to build a dashboard that shows the weekly burn rate for the different PPE supplies. And then on top of that, I've been in talks with some Apple consultant developers, and they are interested in building a lightweight web app that would allow our warehouse guy over at the Smoothie King Center to do intake in an easier electronic way, and then to be able to check people out in an electronic way as well. So without me going over there and observing all of that process, and without talking to our guy on the ground there, who is actually collecting the data and then inputting the data, I wouldn't have been able to build this dashboard. And then without my colleague Ron's help, I wouldn't have been able to actually have the up-to-date data, because now the issue we're running into is they have all the paper data and they put it into these certain tabs, but those tabs are formatted in a way that doesn't really facilitate dashboarding, right? So that's a whole other issue. I'm going to go ahead and just show you quickly this dashboard, and then I'm going to wrap up, and then I'll let you all ask questions. Let's see how this works. Okay. Not that. Oh. All right, sorry about that. All right. So this is a quick glance at what we deployed, what was given out that first week that we started really receiving and deploying PPE through the Smoothie King Center. So you can see that on that first week, and then we go to the next week, and the items that are at the top are things that were identified by leadership as the things they were most interested in understanding how quickly we were running through. I don't know why that coveralls one isn't loading, but we'll keep going. And then this is just last week. So these are the things that we've deployed just last week. And now that we've got about 3 weeks under our belt, we can do a trend line, right? So then that's my next job. And then after that, it's incorporating, all right, what can we count on getting in as far as donations? And then how much is going out, and how much PPE can we offer to neighboring parishes, right? Or other types of entities that need it. We've been giving out a lot to funeral homes. We've been giving out to different public safety entities in Jefferson Parish and other neighboring parishes. So that's kind of what's going on now. I wouldn't necessarily consider this big data, but there are other things happening in this response that are definitely big data related, specifically all of this health data. So all sorts of things going on. And that is about it. I wanted to just let you guys know that a few other things are in the works, right? I talked about smart cities. The Real-Time Crime Center actually got an award for their video, their crime center work. We're working on a public Wi-Fi project, so you can stay tuned, see if that actually comes to fruition. We're also working on a big device donation and reallocation program, and that would use then big data from schools to figure out who those devices got allocated to. And then this Entergy partnership I keep talking about, but we'll see where that goes. And that's about it.
Thank you so much for sharing. And I really appreciate your transparency and talking about some of the hard lessons you had to learn along the way. It's really insightful. I know we have another talk starting in 4 minutes, but we do have a couple questions from guests. Let's see. What are your most exciting predictive analytics projects for the city?
Ooh. So I get excited. There's some cool stuff having to do with criminal justice, right? So not necessarily the locking up of anyone, but the predictive projects related to getting people out and helping people get out of the system. So looking at trends within people's behavior and people's different opportunities and how often they've taken advantage of those opportunities. So I always, when it comes to like human life and human liberty, those are always going to be my most favorite projects.
Awesome. Another one from a guest. How did you start and organize your smart city program? What objectives and goals did you use to align your efforts and controls or principles do you use to govern the program? Sorry, I'll reread that second half of the question. What objectives and goals do you use to align your efforts and controls or principles do you use to govern the program?
So I would say the number one principle over everything that we do is equity, right? So, or digital inclusion is kind of what we're saying now. So the first thing we think about is, can this serve everyone? And will this contribute in any way to the digital divide? If the answer to those is The first one, we want that to be yes, and the second one, we want it to be no. If those answers align right, then we can take the next step. And the next step is then seeing if it falls under we have like a broader acronym. So it's like, I think it's Smart City, and then SMART and city all coincide with a specific word. I cannot remember it off the top of my head, but we do have that. And then it goes in front of the city council, and then they have to sign off on these things. So it's pretty bureaucratic for some things that are really big, but for other little things like the trash cans that sense whether or not they're full. Those things don't take as long. So.
One question we received from a guest that I know personally is near and dear to your heart. If one isn't directly involved with a large corporation like Entergy, how can the local community get involved with these smart city initiatives?
Oh, good idea. So part of what I'm hoping comes out of the really bureaucratic process is a way for public participation, right? So we have mandated public participation in all of our projects, like construction projects, things like that. And ideally, when we undertake something big that's citywide, maybe it's a pilot to start, but then it goes citywide, we aim to build in community participation, and that would be through the Office of Neighborhood Engagement at the city.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more. What is the process in auditing data for security purposes, and do you pass that to a third party?
Auditing data for security purposes. So no, we do not pass that on to a third party. I would say, so it depends, right? Usually the agency whose data it is tells us what to do with it and where to put it and who can see it or not, right? And oftentimes that data is then linked into some type of application or tool. So for example, the city organizes and administers healthcare for the homeless, right? So any data that comes from that program goes into a specific database that's then connected back to them. And we, as a city and as IT, don't necessarily access that data. We don't have access to it. It's only our sysadmins. But Healthcare for the Homeless is able to access it. And we haven't gotten into any type of auditing just yet, but we do every so often take a sweep of the environment and make sure that everything's still secure through different tools.
Wonderful. Well, Whitney, thank you so much for putting your presentation together, for sharing all of this with us. If you have any resources you want to share with the folks, any additional links we didn't get to go through, definitely send them my way and I'll be sure they get to the attendees. But we really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a good night. Enjoy.
Thank you.